Good evening, our Poe peoples. Welcome back to more Poe discussions. We have a special guest tonight. You've seen him, you know him, you love him, just like we do. Jason Markiewitz. He is joining us tonight to talk more about his wonderful world of Audioworks. So, Jason, introduce. You take it away.
All right. Well, hello, Jeanie and Carmen and everyone. Thank you for joining in tonight and listening to me talk a little bit about what I've been up to and audio dramas and audiobook creation and things like that. I'll just introduce real quickly. My name is Jason Markiewitz. I've been an audiobook narrator since 2020. About the same time, I started my audio drama company because, surprisingly enough, as we all remember, in 2020, COVID locked everybody down.
Yes.
And I was on stage in a play called The Dinner Party at the time, and the theater got shut down. And so we all started looking for other creative avenues. I took a course on audiobook narration, and the rest, as they say, is history. Wow. But I've been a huge audio drama fan for a really long time, going back to some of the earlier, radio dramas and mysteries and detective stories I listened to as a kid. And, I got, I don't even know, a couple hundred of them on an iPod, and I ran around with them. That's what I listened to while I was running. And then I kind of worked that into some of the more formal audio dramas like Alien Voices and Macabre Mansion, LA Theater Works, some of these, bigger companies, Graphic Audio, that just creates these amazing audio drama productions. And being kind of a theater guy and loving audiobooks, I built my own audio drama company and started off with Works of Poe. So there we have it.
And Jason, for our listeners and viewers, what are the works that you've done of Poe?
Yeah, so funny story, if I can indulge for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm trying to think back. I think it was about 2011. I started my first script, I guess, for Poe Works, and my idea was I'm going to start with something relatively simple, and I don't mean that in terms of simplicity or simply. I mean for me, don't take on a project too big, right? Because you're doing the first one, and I've always loved The Raven, and so I used that as my first script where I wanted to change some of the words but keep the meter. Modernize the language a little bit for modern audiences, modern listeners, but also create it to where it was multi-character. So I split the single narration into a narrator and as I call him, the forlorn gentleman, and then created very simple. I mean, The Raven only says nevermore, but I wanted to create a character for that bird. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote the script out, and I wasn't exactly sure how to do it. I didn't know anything about recording voice. I was not involved in audio dramas or audiobook narration at all at that point. And so there was a lot of that it seemed like something I wanted to do. It was just way too far out there in the nether regions. There was no way I really could figure out an easy way to get this done. And everything that I had heard about recording on your phone and recording on it was just like, don't do it. It sounds terrible. So it kind of put me back a little bit. I didn't do anything with it for probably 10 years. Wow. And as I started doing audiobook narration and learning more about recording voice, editing it, sound mastering, things like that, I figured, well, now's the time. Let's break it out. Mm-hmm. And so I dusted off that old script and polished it up a little bit, wrote an intro and a conclusion, and then started actually to do the recording. Found a young musician who was just starting out doing original scoring and brought him onto the project, and I've used him for all of our Poe works. But that was the first one I did. That was 2021 when we released The Raven. Okay. And it's only 16 minutes or something, and then with all the pre and the post, and there's a little history of Poe at the end of that work. I think it takes it to a grand total of like 21 minutes something. So it's not massively long, but it was such a long project. It was such a feeling of completion when it was done that this thing had been 10 years in the making to do a 20-minute production.
Sometimes it works that way, because I know the first time that I watched or heard, or both, I guess you would say it, considering it was on YouTube where I found it, that I immediately looked at it from a teacher standpoint. because that was one of the things that was so phenomenal to me, is that your works was bringing to life something that, let's just be honest, it's old.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, I mean,
Yeah.
come on. And teachers especially, we have things that we're teaching not for just history, but literature, science, math, things that are from hundreds of years ago, and you got to bring it as modern as you can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that I loved about it, because I could see using that in the classroom and getting kids involved and loving literature, because sometimes, and we all know, especially anybody that's had kids or taught children or whatever, sometimes they have the attention span of a gnat.
Oh
And
yes.
and you're trying to go, okay, how can I get them to be involved, to take this seriously? So that, and especially if you have students who are learning impaired of any kind,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
dyslexic or something. So
Yeah, and I appreciate how you said that and related to the schools. It's something that I've been really proud of, is having some of my works being used in a couple of school districts and also in a homeschool network in Texas. So,
Oh,
just those are it's meaningful to me. I know that there's other Poe creators out there that do the same thing. So I'm not trying to, make it like I'm the only one or it's something brand new.
mhm.
But it's important to me to be able to share, just like you said, some great works, some great historic works, and let's bring that into a more modern age. But it was also important for me to not change the storyline. So you still got, like, if you listen to Cask of Amontillado, that we earned our Saturday Visitor Award nomination for last year, that takes a different stance on why the story is being told. It introduces a couple new characters, but when you finish it, you have heard the story that Poe wrote. But contextually, at the beginning and at the end, there's some differences to it because I wrote the bookends to the story that we recorded. But the story itself still carries the flavor of exactly what Poe wrote. Same thing with The Telltale Heart. I gave it a little bit of a unique ending, a couple of different things in the beginning, but the story itself stays very true to what Poe intended. And that's what I want to always do, is we want to be creative, be unique with it, tell it a little bit of a different way, but I don't want it to be completely like reversing the intent or changing too much of the stylistics, I guess, of the story. And that's then just going back to the Raven. That's why the meter is still the same too.
Yeah.
Even if we changed some words, updated some phrases or something, I wanted to keep the rhyme and the meter the same so that you could still carry on, just like you never knew it was written differently. It kept the exact same pacing and the same meter through the whole thing. So that was very important.
Yeah, I think you've definitely captured that with what you've done. And you're right. I mean, having students listen to those types of things, they they do need a modern spin on things sometimes. And I know with my students, I try to find some things to connect, because otherwise sometimes I lose them, especially if it's an older work.
Right. Well, and the age of these works is something too, because how many dozens, if not hundreds of times have these been rewritten, sometimes recorded, sometimes made into movies or short films or whatever the case is. You've done it, over and over and over and over again. So something that was important to me too was tell the story a little bit different. Don't do exactly word for word. Don't be exactly as someone else did it. Put your own spin on it, but do it do it politely, right? Do it with honorarium to the work.
Fidelity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Keep it to where you're honoring the story, but you're making it your own.
Yeah, I agree. And modern adaptations are, I think, very well done, as you say, if you keep it true to that original form with some added details, taking that little bit of, literary license to it. Yeah, that's awesome.
And it also, just like you said, that there are other folks, we'll call them Poe folks, the Poe folks out there that do, they do their own renditions, whether it be their own interpretations of movies, of stories, audio or video or whatever. And it just is like different teachers. The different teachers will teach things different ways. People will interpret things different ways. And it's always good to have that spread so that you can choose something that calls to you,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
appeals to
absolutely.
yours.
Absolutely.
And so that's why one of the things with your Audioworks, and anybody that's watched Poe Unplugged or any of our audios or videos or anything knows I'm not a hate to say this, I'm not a big audiobooks person. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't like to be read to. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't like that kind of thing. I love your YouTube videos because it's giving me visuals that I can get
Yeah.
lost in the visuals. But if I'm just listening to someone read, I can't do that. I just can't. I just can't. It doesn't work for me. It's just not my thing. But that's okay. Not everybody likes that sort of thing, and I think a lot of that has to deal with. I grew up. I don't know a time that I've never known how to read. There's not a time in my memory I don't ever remember not knowing how to read. And I think that's part of it. And it's part of who I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. But some people they like to have that those different actual voices, you know,
I
that appeal
definitely
to
do.
them, that, gets their interest going. And that's great. That it really, it draws people in. And that's one of the things. You give a variety that people who may not like to sit down and read or may have the attention span of a gnat that needs some help with that. So
Well, and
yeah.
as you guys, there aren't many characters in any of the stories
Mhm.
that I've dramatized, right?
True.
I mean, the Raven
Right.
technically was one, and maybe two if
Right.
you count the Raven as a
Yeah.
character. I brought in even Lenore as a character in that one, and just my daughter whispering the voice in the hall, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you've got a couple characters in Telltale Heart. You've got, realistically only two that ever show up in a Cask of Amontillado, but we added a bunch more for our drama. Manuscript Found in a Bottle is a single narrator, right? I added a few voices, as characters in the background and things when I dramatized manuscript. But really, you don't have like these massive casts. It's not a Shakespearean play.
Right.
And so being able to bring those multi voices in, create some dialogue and new characters, I think helps move the story along too in a different way than making it just feel like an audiobook narration.
I definitely agree. Do you have a favorite Poe work that you've done? Like of your productions that you've done, is there
Yeah.
one that you like the best for, and it could be any kind of reason?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always gonna say Cask of Amontillado.
Yeah.
Not only because it's just the true answer to your question, it's my favorite of Poe's stories ever, and that's the one I always link up with. But it was also the one that I felt like after I did The Raven, this was my next task, and I'm like, okay, now make it good. The Raven was good, but let's step it up. Let's really crush it with Cask and bringing in different characters into it and finding a new way to tell the story with the attendants in the Montresor house and being able to work the sound design for indoors in the villa, outdoors in the carnival, down the stairs in the catacombs with the echoes and the dripping water. That was a challenge. But I was like, let's make sure to spend the time and do it right. The only deadline is the one I impose. So take the time and get it done right. And it was really important to do it that way. So that's my favorite story, and it's still the one that I like the most of all of our works that we've done so far. But I think it's because I'm very partial to it.
Absolutely.
I think the one that's going to be most complicated is the one I'm currently editing right now, and that's Mask of the Red Death.
Okay.
And the recording has been done for a while. It's very complicated, and trying to work the script to where you're not encompassed in narration. So I had to build a few extra characters to carry this very narrative story into more of a dramatic format. And so there were a lot of who do I make say this? How do I show this without telling it? When showing it, you can't use anything visual, right? So how is it the listener how can they feel the colors of the rooms? right? I mean, how do you hear that? How do you hear that? There's a lot of challenges with what I'm dealing with on soundscape and background and design. And then, but all of the voices are done and they're all great. And I look forward to getting all that finished up, but it is extraordinarily complicated.
I can only imagine, because you're right. It's like, how do you hear the colors of the room?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. So
Yeah. It's really been interesting, and but I think that they're going to have that mix between a little bit of description from someone, but you know what I'm saying, where you can't just go like sounding like a tour guide, and here's the green room, and here's the blue room, and here's right. So you can't do that, otherwise they're like, okay, you obviously failed on your ability to create meaningful dialogue. So so we had to be a little bit more sly than that in how we wrote the character parts and what was happening in these rooms, and really kind of get some background effects going at the same time. So it's going to be, I think it'll be entertaining when it's all finished up.
nice. And it's the last one of the Poe works that you're doing.
It's the last one of this phase.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I won't say it's the last one, because I mean, you can see that by the sign behind me, Poe inspired audio theater, right? I mean, that's where I started, and I'm going to keep bringing in, a story here and there into it. But I had it on my list. These are the ones I'm going to take care of first. And one we haven't even really talked about is Annabelle Lee, that I just did as a special one-off, a couple of years ago, where just I love that poem, and now I wanted to put some, cliffside sound effects, and try to make that, a little bit of a nautical feel, a little bit of that, you can hear the waves in the background, you can hear the wind in the background, you get the emotion of the narrator and that kind of stuff.
So yeah. On with your merchandise, you've got a very cool t-shirt, which Jeannie and I didn't get to wear tonight because I haven't gotten to give that to her yet. But you also have some of your works on a CD, I believe, and
Right.
flash drive you can purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I decided to do, because last year at Poe Fest, I had asked a couple of questions. One of them was, I was wearing that t-shirt and people are like, where do I get that? I'm like, well, you can't, because I only made this one. So I decided to fix that for this year at Poe Fest. But I was also asked, how do we get this stuff digitally? Because I don't even have a CD player in my car. And I'm still a CD guy. I like having the tangible CDs. I buy the audiobooks on CDs, from Barnes and Noble or Amazon or whatever. I enjoy tangible, CDs to listen to. But I still have MP3s and digital stuff as well. But I figured, how can I maximize the ability to get people all of our audio dramas in a digital format that is cost effective for them, but then also maybe something that can have other usability. And I just thought about, a flash drive. So I picked up these 16 gigabyte flash drives, and basically it's our entire compendium that is on these things. So all the MP3s of all of our audio dramas, plus the videos that you'll find on YouTube, plus any of the trailers, any of the promotional videos, the Poe birthday special we did last January, and, all the cover art designs, and of course Annabelle Lee, and there's even a promo of Mask of the Red Death. So there's a lot of different things that we put on there, and it's something to the effect of about 5 hours or so of audio, 5 or 6 hours, of videos and audio together, and all these things that are on there. But then there's still plenty of space left, and of course the drive isn't locked. So as I told somebody who asked about it, I said, yeah, you can take everything off that drive, put it on your computer, use the drive for something else if you want to. I mean, it's just something that has, usability beyond, just the fact that that's where all of our products are currently living.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea,
especially in this tech age, because a USB drive is something that is very, like you said, cost effective, but has multiple uses, and you can just take it, download what you want, and then reuse something. And that's a great thing too. Now, you said that you're editing Mask of the Red Death, and you just released the manuscript in the bottle. So, what is your actual next uh, product that you're going to produce, or do you have one in the works that you have a thought that's going to come out soon, maybe in the next year?
Well, if you're talking about Poe works, I'm going between three.
Okay.
None of them have even started the scripting process. I'm going to spend time and review because just like I did with the ones that I have produced already, it was
Mhm.
even though I was familiar with the stories, I still wanted to read them all again and make sure that how is this going to work if I dramatize it. And
Right.
so it's important to kind of read them through because they might be great stories, but they just might not be conducive to the way I want to do the dramatization. I'm sure someone else could do whatever they want, but I'm looking at a particular style that I want to keep with all my products and be very consistent with how I'm producing these. So I'm going between a few. But one thing that I had thought of is the Murder in the Rue Morgue series is actually a trilogy, and so I thought about doing that as a trilogy and spending some time over the course of a number of years to bring that as a grouping. I've also looked at Hot Frog and trying to see whether or not that might be something to do. And then I really just heard so much about the Gold Bug this year at PoFest that I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to add that to my maybe list, because it just seemed that was like the story of the festival this year. Everybody was talking about the Gold Bug, so and I think part of it had to do with the fact we had the National Cryptologic Museum right there as well. But
Yes.
there was a lot of hubbub about that, so I figured, okay, I'm gonna have to go back and look there. So I don't have one in the works that I'm gonna say yes, we're doing this next. And at the end of every year, I build a Christmas production. So I've been knee deep in my A Cratchit Christmas to be released on December 21st. So that's been encompassing all my time.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be cool. And you've done some audiobooks that are Poe related
Yeah,
with Holly Knightley.
that's right.
And I've listened to both of those. And Riley House, I had read first, but then I
Mhm.
was like, I have to listen to it because Jason's doing it. And you did such an amazing job on both of
Thank you.
them. Yeah. And then the Killing Tree was really cool too.
Yeah, that as same thing I told Holly. It's like, when I was narrating Riley House, I was like, man, this is good. The characters are fun, the story moves. It's only like 2 hours and 20 minutes, so I mean, it's not a long listen. Um, but it just like the scenes didn't drag, and so I was like, this is good. It moves right through the story. But then, I got to the Killing Tree, and I was like, not only did the story move, but the characters are just that much better. Like the entire story you could just tell the advancement in storytelling, and that one is just, oh my gosh, the Killing Tree was so much fun to narrate, and I had such a good time with it because of the character arc of the main character, and just this nerdy math kid in the beginning, to heading home, and then all of the turmoil he has with his buddy as they're trying to film this project, and then to see his result at the end, right? I mean, I don't want to give anything away. I want everyone to go listen to it, but his character arc is just so well written, and it was so much fun to be able to change my tone and how I was able to really bring that transformation to life from the beginning to the end. It was really really fun to narrate.
Yeah, I so enjoyed both of them. And the Killing Tree, I remember like I couldn't wait to finish it. And so I had just a few minutes left. And so when I got into my classroom, because I listen, to work and back, I was like, I have to finish it right now because I can't wait until
I
this
love it. Yeah.
afternoon. And she really threw in some curves, which I
Yeah.
loved. And so, but just when you're doing all the different voices and like you said, tones and mood
Yeah.
and everything else, how do you keep like track of that as you're doing it? Like what is your process for doing that?
Well, I'll keep it short because I think this is about an hour long class on how to do characters. But I'll say, just real quickly is you read the book beginning to end before you ever start recording, and if you don't, you're asking for trouble because there's going to be, let's just use as an example, you start some character with a voice that's deep and resonant like a James Earl Jones, and then by the end you find out that he talks in a falsetto, right? And you're like, oh no, and you got to go back through the whole thing again, or vice versa, right? So you've kind of got to make sure you don't trip yourself up as you go through. Now the challenge, of course, is the end of the story, and so don't don't be the portrayal of the person at the end in the beginning, right? Make sure that they allow the character to grow and allow the voice changes to happen or the characterization to move through the story without finding yourself in a position where you're like, I have nowhere to go. I'm halfway through the story, but I've already kind of done the way I would play this person at the end. So I do a chapter by chapter outline of how the person develops as they go through. If I have a character, like Knox Lansbury, in Killing Tree, I really wanted to make sure that I kept a character arc line for him. But then I'm also going to mark chapter by chapter who comes in and who goes out. When do they show up again later? They might have a book that's 4 or 5 times as long. I've done some of these books that are 10 hours long, and you might have a character in chapter 1 they don't come back in until chapter 65. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't remember what this person sounds like. So you've got one of two options. One is you either make very detailed character notes and you try your best to remember, which is kind of dicey, or you create a sound file. And so you just read a line or two or a paragraph or whatever in that character's voice, and then you just save it as a character file. So when you go back to it, you're like, okay, what in the world did Mom Lansbury sound like, right? Just pipe up, on the drive and pull that up and listen to it for a minute. You get back in the groove with how the character sounds, and you can continue on.
That's phenomenal.
Yes, because I can't imagine keeping track of everything and doing it as well as you do. I mean, because
Thank you.
You keep the characters true to form throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's tough too with emotions, because if you're as I've even found in audio dramas, which thankfully in audio books and in audio dramas, unless you're doing it live, if you mess up, delete it, do it again. Right.
Yeah.
So
you can do it take 2, take
exactly.
3.
Oh my gosh. And I've had in fact during the Killing Tree, it was probably in the middle of the book. I'm going through, probably I was recording for 25 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it was. And I got to the point where I was thinking, this is just awful. Like I just I don't know what's going on today, but this is terrible. And then I just came out and deleted the whole file for that whole night's recording and just like, forget it. We're just going to do it again later, and that's great. And it had nothing to do with it. It was just like, I felt flat, right? I mean, you've got to keep the emotion, you got to keep the energy. And if the listener loses interest because you're just monotone or you lost the characterization that makes that character unique, they'll just quit listening and may not go back, may not sit in the parking lot, Carmen, and finish the story, right?
Exactly.
That is very true because I have listened to some lengthy books where the narrator, it was a little bit on the monotone side or just something about their voice. It just didn't sit well with me. But then the story was pretty good. So I always, like, if I started, I'm going to finish it. There's only been, I think, once or twice where the narrator was either so bad or the story was bad and the narrator was okay, but I couldn't finish it. But yeah, you make it very enjoyable to listen to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I take a lot of pride in it. It's important to me. I don't have a bazillion titles like some narrators have out there that are, SAG-AFTRA type member. I'm still independent, right, with what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean I have to be any less professional about my job,
Absolutely.
And so I take it very personally, and I want to make sure that the people that listen to it, they go, okay, yeah, I want to see what he narrates next, and actually have a person pick up a book because I narrated, not just because they know the author.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have a favorite project that's not Poe that you've done that like you really like I don't know, maybe the story was really good or just something you did differently than you've done before?
Well, I think that's probably a twofold question.
Okay.
One is like the audio dramas that aren't Poe, because they're classic fiction, still in that same genre. Which is where I really enjoy it. And over the course of the last 2 years, one of them being a biblical story about Artaban and the quest for the king, and then another one here with A Cratchit Christmas based on A Christmas Carol. Those were fun, uh, just based on the creativity and some of the sound design and things behind it, and it really kind of is fun. But I'm a big Western fan, and so while narrating, the horror suspense type stories, for Holly has been awesome, and I love doing this. I love her writing anyway, so it's a shoe in anytime she sends me a script, on which I'm working another one for here shortly. Yeah, so that's going to be awesome. But I've got a series of westerns that I've done, called the Walking Y series by a rancher in, oh gosh, Missouri, I believe. Jeter Isley is his name. I think the ranch is in Missouri. But in any case, wrote a series of westerns based on 1903, 1904, and 1905 Montana. And so the characters kind of bring in all of these unique personalities that were in the Old West. So you get these gruff landowners, you get these squirrely, snarky state senators, you get these, ranch foremen, you get Irish immigrants, you get and now I'm dealing with Italian immigrants coming in his third series. We've got kids, I've had to have priests and servants and English school teachers coming over, who just can't fathom themselves in the West because it's so unrefined. So all of these little things that really make the story fun is about the richness of those characters. So enjoying doing all of those in the audiobook format.
That sounds amazing because I love me some Westerns.
Yeah.
I've always loved Westerns and I've loved watching them. I love reading them. So, but I can understand what you're talking about because one of the things with those stories, anyone who writes them well has to include all those historical aspects to that genre.
Yeah.
And, having that vast number of immigrants, of, land barons, of things like that, that would make me lose my mind trying to keep track of all those voices in my head. Because it's bad enough I have voices in my head now that are just like, shut up half the time,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh, for sure. But I think the beauty of it, and it's kind of reminiscent of a book I did a few years ago, called The Russian Who Saved the World.
ooh,
And it was, I had a lot of, Soviet submarine officers I had to make unique voices for. I had to speak in Russian during part of the book, as
ooh,
well as had to do the entire Kennedy administration from 1962. And so I was on YouTube listening to how these people talk, and how what are their mannerisms and their pacing when they talk. Do they talk fast or slow? Is it a accentuated drawl like Lyndon Johnson, or do you better sound like JFK if you're going to pull off JFK?
Yeah.
So just all those things that really require a lot of listening and study and attempting to get it right. I'm not an impersonator, so they're not perfect for each of these people, but I want to make sure that they're consistent, that they're passable to the voices of the people that were at that time, because they are real people. So you want to try to make sure you intonate the right way and give them that personality that they had.
Wow.
and do them justice because that's the thing. It's like you want to pay homage to them and what they contributed at the time. So
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, definitely. So, Jason, you mentioned Cask of Amontillado is your favorite Poe story. That's one of my all-time favorites as well. Do you have a favorite Poe poem? I know you said you talked about Annabelle Lee and the Raven. Is there any other ones that are your favorites?
I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge like studier or student of his poetry.
Yeah.
And so I'm not. To say I have a vast repertoire would not be true. Um, I know that the Raven and Annabelle Lee are like quintessential Poe poems to me, right? And that's kind of where I focused, and so I really love doing those as dramatizations. But I did that because I liked them, because I felt they spoke to me. It was important to me. I felt like I could do them justice because I understood contextually and so forth. So those were important, but I don't know that there's another one that just like jumps at me.
Okay. Yeah, and to me, those two are that they scream Poe. They
Yeah.
represent Poe in so many ways, and it's hard not to love both of them.
Mhm.
Well, and they're also the two most quintessential that are taught in schools too. So everybody at least has a passing knowledge of
Yeah.
those when they hear the names.
Right.
But my question, Jason, is have you ever thought of doing a Poe rendition of a Poe story? Like have it where you're doing it in Poe's voice. Like picture like when he was actually writing this and he was sitting around a fireplace with a bunch of his friends and reading his works. Have you
Yeah.
ever thought about doing one of those? Like a Poe side chat kind of thing.
Yeah. Right. I had thought about it, but
Uh-huh.
that's as far as it went.
Okay.
Because there are like we all know Stephen Smith, right? One man Poe.
Oh,
He does
absolutely. Yeah.
an
Absolutely.
absolutely brilliant job with
Yeah.
just anything he touches turns to gold, right? I mean, it's just amazing. And so that concept of doing a story like that, I think that how could I do that better? I know what you're saying, and I get, you're talking sitting in a chair, not necessarily acting it out, but doing
Right.
something that's kind of more masterpiece theater style versus one man Poe style, right?
Exactly.
But I had considered that in other forums, like not necessarily with Poe's works, but I had looked at possibly doing that as a series of children's stories, where we're doing it that way, where they're shorter snips. It's not necessarily a longer story, but it maybe it goes 15 minutes or something at the max, in some of those. So I've considered that, but I have not with the Poe works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just curious because
Yeah.
I could just see you doing like a fireplace and
Yeah.
Poe and just making it to where like a 'twas the night before Christmas type
Right.
of thing, just and I in my nightcap,
Yeah.
kind of singing Poe cap and stuff. But I would just think that would be kind of cool to do. I was just curious if it ever had crossed your mind. So thank you.
Well, what crossed my mind more than a passing fancy, which I am going to be writing next year or the year after, and I'm not going to bottle myself up, into a timeline per se,
Yeah.
but I am working on a one man play that's not necessarily like the way Stephen does for the stories, but it's a unique character that is living through Poe's stories. Doing that as about a 1 hour long, that I could do at a community theater or at a library or something like that. That you get a feeling of Poe's works, maybe no more than two or three in kind of a synopsis format, but they all are related to this person's life story or this person as they're going through, whatever it is that the script ends up leading me to. But yeah, so I'm kind of fleshing that out to see if that has possibilities.
That sounds amazing. It really does.
I would
I
look forward to that.
appreciate the confidence. So we'll see how it goes.
Yes, yes. And you're right. Like when you do like especially a writing project, because Jeannie and I and my husband are working on one as well. And it's a lot more than you realize
Oh
when
yeah.
you're putting things together. And so yeah, as you say, like bottling, and doing the pun with manuscript found in a bottle.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, and just to like set the goal of I want to do it, and then
Hmm.
as you're writing, it may even take you to a different place than you didn't even realize you were going to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
which will
Yeah.
be
And
exciting.
darn these full-time jobs that don't allow us to just have fun with this stuff constantly, right?
I know, I know.
Like, too bad the lottery winners are not, are not willing to just put forth enough money that we don't have to work for a living, that we can just
There
do
you
whatever
go.
we want to
Yes,
have fun.
we need to find
Yes.
a Poe grant.
Yeah,
Hmm.
some Poe
Agreed.
fundraisers.
Oh, well, and you received a nomination for the Saturday Visitor Award for Casco
Yeah.
Amontillado, and again, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How did it feel when you heard that you got the nomination?
Oh, I don't even know how to describe it. You have that small sense of, am I good enough to even put in my production for consideration, right?
Mhm.
And then, as I have found in other circumstances with audio books that I have submitted for various reviews or for awards or things like that,
Mhm.
sometimes I get through some of the vetting stages, but not quite to the end,
Okay.
But I'm like, so I didn't record this for a major publishing house, and it was just an independent author and an independent narrator. We got past a couple of gates. That was fantastic, and so you kind of feel that way. And in some cases, I've gotten to the annual award cycle with a couple of audio books.
Mhm.
But when I got that email, I will tell you, I knew, because they are very good about the dates at which they are going to give the results, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, tomorrow's the day, right? And I'm just kind of thinking through it. And then don't get too excited, because then you'll get, obliterated when the email doesn't come through and these kind of things.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking about, how important Casco Amontillado was to me to do, how invested I was in it. And I mean, just honestly, if I had not gotten through the nomination phase, I think I would have been pretty dejected.
Yeah.
Not, and I don't want to sound conceited by saying it like it deserves to be, right. I mean, I think we're validated now, but but I think at that time I was like, this is so good. I really like the parts of it that were created, the sounds behind it, the echoing, and the death sequence, and I mean all of these things together. I was like, this is really something I'm proud of. I will submit this anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And to have that come back with being in, at that time, I mean, that was a top 10 essentially on that adaptations category.
Mhm.
And it was international. There were people in there from Luxembourg, right, and Canada, and so I mean, it wasn't like it was just a couple of U.S. people that were in on the list, and so I think that was really strong validation for what we had done, and I was very proud of it in the first place. I still would have been, even if we didn't get nominated, but I think that having that award nomination, especially a Poe nomination for a Poe project, right?
Yes.
Which that meant more than anything, is that it was a company that professionalizes in Poe, and they saw the goodness of the work that we did, and I think that was the most meaningful to me.
Absolutely. And that the Cask of Amontillado, just, I mean, all your works are wonderful. That one, again, like I said, because it's one of my favorites. Like you said, all of the sound effects and just
Mhm.
the whole thing, it's brilliant. So
Thank you.
well deserved.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And we've got another one going in next year, so we'll see how it works.
Yay!
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be the winning one this time.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be great.
That would be. So let's see. We already talked about like what you've got coming up next.
Mhm.
Anything else you want to add for our listeners and viewers?
Well, I'll just promote the fact that while I started with Poe, and I have other projects and things that are going on at the same time, my production company is a production company, and we do casting, we do open casting, and in fact, for our A Cratchit Christmas that's coming out here in a couple of weeks, we had international casting, and it was important to me to find the right voices, the right sounds, the right tones, and sometimes the right accents for the parts that I really wanted. And so the people who I cast to play Bob and Emily Cratchit are from London, and they are fantastic. And I mean, I mean, Mark Zakian is the one who plays Bob, and he did such a great job with all the different emotions that has to come in from surprise to pain to feeling, kind of a longing to a forlorn atmosphere, to praying, and being very somber, and then the joy and the happiness and everything around the family, being scared of Mr. Scrooge in some cases, and then kind of under his breath, I can't stand this guy. I mean, he did all of those different things. It was great. And then the Rachel Esposti played Emily, and they were not recording together, but you listen to them on there, the way that their emotions work back and forth in that, it's brilliant. And so just looking at that, if I would just offer that if you're interested in audio dramas and interested in classic fiction, which that's where all of ours have been at this point, we will be doing World War II era serial starting mid next year. I'm writing it right now, and we're going to start that as kind of a series productions based on my grandfather's battalion. So that's coming up, and that's going to kind of deter from the classic fiction mentality. Mm-hmm. But Christmas productions and what we've done with Poe obviously is the classic works. And so we'll have casting calls out there, and certainly able to check out the website or the social media to find out when those are.
That's awesome.
I look forward to it, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know Jeanie is definitely a World War II buff, and we have another friend that loves historical wartime and that kind of thing. So absolutely. That'll be great.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's, again, just like Mask of the Red Death, right? This is becoming very complicated in the scripting, but I'm trying to keep it episodic. So these are not long, 15 to 20 minutes an episode, give or take, but then have them done where you can do maybe 6, 7, 8 episodes for a season, kind of do it more like a podcast series, and have that kind of live year by year, and to keep going on some of those. So I've had a couple people contact me about, hey, I've written a script, or would you be interested in reading it and looking at producing it? So, I mean, there's also those opportunities I'm considering as well, that casting out and producing a script that I was not involved in, but we're taking it on, as producing it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that sounds great. One last question.
Sure.
So how did you get introduced to Poe in like your youth, adulthood, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think 6th or 7th grade, we all had to read Cask of Amontillado, I think it was, and Telltale Heart. Those are the kind of the standard, two that we go through, and whether it's late elementary school or junior high or whatever the case is, nowadays middle school, I guess. But that's kind of where I think my first introduction was. But I've had a long history of enjoying classic literature like H.G. Wells and Herman Melville and Jules Verne, Charles Dickens, Bram Stoker, Edgar Allan Poe, right? So those are Jack London. I mean, these are the authors I grew up reading, and so it was just a big smattering of all of these different authors that wrote anywhere in the 19th century, realistically, and that's kind of where my interest is, in that 19th century literature.
Yeah.
So really, I kind of grew up with that. I'd also found myself in a group called Toastmasters, which I was in for quite a few years, and probably should go back, But I was at Edwards Air Force Base in Toastmasters, and as I was working toward one of our certifications, there was a project we had to do, and for that project, it was a long form narrative reading. So probably the first time I did an audiobook, right, was a live performance with this during a Toastmaster session. But I read Cask of Amontillado because it's my favorite. And so I did that, and just kind of got reblued on Poe. And it was a few years later is when I started my script for The Raven, and and have kind of moved forward since then.
Okay. Well, what I was saying, I was just saying that it's just ironic how Poe always shows up, no matter what time of life, whether it's early, middle, or late in life. He's always there, and it always changes, and he's just one of those things. You just can't escape the Poe.
No.
Yeah. Well, and think about nowadays how many different TV shows, movies, and adaptations, things, even if they're not about Poe, they're throwing Poe stuff in it. I
Yep.
love the series Wednesday, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
great, but I mean, you can't make one episode without having a Poe reference in it, even if you take out the fact they're at, Nevermore High School or,
Right.
so,
Yep.
but I mean, just all the other little things that get tossed in there, so I mean, there's obviously a lot. Pale Blue Eye did great,
Oh, yeah.
and Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix,
Yes.
was real popular. So they've got a lot of this kind of. Poe is making his way back out into the mainstream again with a lot of these writers that are kind of harkening back on some of his storylines and producing these new productions that are really drawing people in.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because my husband and I will watch, different series that either I watched and he didn't, and vice versa, or we just never watched some series that we were interested in. And it is so funny because so many of them, because I think it's probably leaning towards what we like, but there's always a Poe episode, and it's just like, oh, wait, hold on. And it's just, and these could be from, the early 2000s, even the 90s, 80s, that kind of thing. And it's just exciting that he is still going after all this time. But like what you just said, the very modern current years, he's heavy, within all of the different TV shows and things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jeannie, anything else that you can think of?
Nope. I think we've covered everything that I had planned.
All right. Jason, any last words?
No, it's always great to be with you guys, and I look forward to the next time. So thanks for having me on, and happy 100th.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, that is coming up at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So I think your episode is going to be 97.
Oh man.
Isn't that awesome?
That's great.
Absolutely. We are
Poe
out.
out.